In the glimmering world of wealth and luxury, there are choices that seem small, but can alter the course of one's life forever. Imagine a millionaire, someone who has everything money can buy, from sprawling estates to cars that gleam with the polish of privilege. Yet, despite all this, he faces a choice that he's about to regret. A horse stands before him, a creature whose coat is plain, its movements unremarkable, and its appearance, to him, far too ordinary. At first glance, it seems like just another horse, blending in with the thousands that roam past the gates of the elite. To this millionaire, who's used to perfection and splendor, the horse's simple demeanor is beneath him. He scoffs at it, dismissing it with a casual wave. "It's not special enough," he mutters. "I've seen better horses, more graceful, more refined." What he doesn't realize in that moment is that the creature he has rejected, this unassuming, plain horse, is about to change everything. The very thing he discarded without a second thought holds the key to his survival. The millionaire, caught up in the whirlwind of his fast-paced, high-stakes life, never anticipates that fate has a strange way of showing its hand. As he moves forward, the horse that was cast aside remains at the edge of his consciousness, its true worth still hidden, even from those who would scoff at it. What seemed like an insignificant decision to him becomes the turning point of his life. But before he can even begin to regret his actions, something far worse is about to unfold, something he couldn't have predicted in his wildest dreams. Danger lurks, and the millionaire, unprepared and unaware, is about to face it head-on. It's not until that moment of crisis that he realizes the one thing he needed most was always right there in front of him. A life-or-death situation, a chance for redemption, and the horse that no one believed in all collide in a moment of raw truth. Will he be able to swallow his pride in time to embrace the help of the creature he once dismissed? Or will he let his arrogance take him down a path from which there's no return? The clock is ticking, and every moment counts. The story of rejection, survival, and the unlikeliest of heroes is just beginning, and the stakes have never been higher. Stay tuned for the next part, where everything changes in the blink of an eye. As the days passed, the millionaire went about his life with the same confidence he'd always had, the rejection of the horse barely a thought in his mind. He attended gala events, made deals that stretched across continents, and basked in the luxury that most could only dream of. To him, life was a series of moments, filled with acquisitions, all centered around the belief that he could buy his way out of any situation. Yet, unbeknownst to him, the world around him was beginning to shift. It was subtle at first, nothing more than a whisper on the wind. People began to notice something strange happening at his estate. Something wasn't quite right. It was the kind of unease that gnaws at the edges of your consciousness without you ever truly understanding why. In the weeks following his rejection of the horse, the millionaire found himself caught in a web of problems that seemed to appear out of nowhere. A business partner, someone he trusted implicitly, turned on him, leaking confidential information that threatened to ruin everything he had built. The courts, too, seemed to be against him, with legal challenges rising against his empire from all sides. His fortune, once an unshakable pillar, was starting to crack, and he couldn't figure out why everything he touched seemed to fall apart. It was during a particularly tense evening that the first real indication of danger made itself known. As the millionaire stood in his office, staring at the growing pile of documents detailing his financial woes, a shadow crossed his doorway. He turned, expecting to see one of his staff members, but instead, he found himself face to face with the horse. It stood in the doorway, calm and still, its eyes reflecting something deeper. something more ancient than the millionaire could comprehend. For a moment, he was caught off guard, his breath catching in his chest. How had the horse gotten here? What was it doing in his private office? Then, just as quickly, he dismissed the thought. He wasn't one for superstition, after all. The horse must have somehow wandered through the estate grounds and into the house, a simple mistake. But still, there was something unsettling about its presence. It felt as though it had come to deliver some kind of warning. Before he could ask what the horse was doing here, a loud crash echoed from outside, followed by the sound of shuffling footsteps. Panic surged through him. He rushed to the window, only to see a group of masked men approaching his mansion. They were heavily armed, their intent clear as they stormed toward the gates. His heart raced. These weren't the kind of people he was used to dealing with. They weren't clients or competitors. These were threats, criminals with a score to settle. His first instinct was to lock the doors, to call for help, but he realized just how fragile his situation had become. His wealth, his connections, his power, they all meant nothing now. He was exposed. As the attackers closed in, the horse remained in the room, its gaze unwavering. It was as if it understood the danger he was in, its presence suddenly no longer a coincidence. The millionaire had no time to dwell on the strange connection he felt with the horse. His life was on the line. Outside, the masked men reached the gates, their voices rising in a chorus of threats and demands. The millionaire's pulse quickened as he scrambled to make sense of the situation. Was this a random attack, or had he unknowingly angered someone powerful enough to take him down? Then, in a surprising turn, the horse moved. It was a subtle shift at first, its head tilting as if it had heard something the millionaire hadn't. And then, without warning, the horse bolted toward the door, galloping with a speed that left him breathless. In that moment, the millionaire realized that the horse wasn't just a passive observer. It was more than the simple, plain creature he had once dismissed. It was acting, but the danger was far from over. The masked men were closing in fast, and with the horse now gone, the millionaire had no choice but to face the reality that his fate was in his own hands, or so he thought. The question that lingered in his mind was one that he couldn't yet answer. Was the horse truly there to help him, or had it simply come to witness the end of everything he had built? The minutes felt like hours as he prepared to make his next move. His mind raced with options, but none felt right. And then, just as he thought all was lost, he heard it hooves pounding against the ground, growing louder, closer, as if the horse was charging back into the fray. What happened next was something that neither he nor anyone else could have predicted. The pounding of hooves grew louder, each beat echoing through the halls of the mansion like a ticking clock, marking the fleeting moments before everything would come to a head. The millionaire, heart racing, spun around in confusion. His first instinct was to bolt for the exit, to flee from the oncoming storm, but there was no time. The masked men were too close, their voices now sharp and demanding. They had no intention of leaving without getting what they came for. His eyes darted around the room, searching for an escape. But the walls seemed to close in, the heavy weight of his circumstances pressing down on him. Every corner, every inch of space felt like it was closing in, suffocating him. And still, the horse's hooves pounded closer, a rhythmic sound that seemed to promise something more, something beyond the chaos. Then, with a sudden crash, the door flung open. The horse burst into the room, its powerful presence filling the space. The millionaire stumbled back, his heart thudding in his chest. It wasn't just a horse, it was a force of nature. The animal's eyes locked onto his, and for the briefest of moments, he felt a strange, unspoken connection. There was something in those eyes, something he couldn't quite grasp, but knew deep down was his only chance. Before he could react, the horse reared up, its hooves striking the floor with a deafening sound that sent shockwaves through the room. The force of its movement shook the very foundations of the mansion. The millionaire watched in stunned silence as the horse, with a wild and untamed energy, turned toward the window, its focus locked on something outside. It was as if the animal was not only aware of the danger, but was preparing to confront it head-on. The masked men were almost at the front door now, their voices rising in a cacophony of threats. The millionaire's mind raced. He had no weapons, no guards to protect him. All he had was this horse, this creature he had once dismissed as unremarkable. And yet, now it seemed like his only hope, his last chance at survival. The tension in the air was palpable. The minutes stretched on endlessly, each second pulling him deeper into a web of uncertainty. Was the horse truly his savior, or had he made a terrible mistake in trusting it? Would it be enough to stop the men who were closing in on him, or was it already too late? Suddenly, the horse charged forward, galloping with incredible speed and power toward the door. The millionaire froze, his breath caught in his throat. What was it doing? It wasn't just running, it was taking control, as if it knew exactly what needed to happen. As the horse neared the door, the masked men burst into the room, but they weren't prepared for what happened next. The horse, in one swift motion, kicked out with its powerful hind legs. The impact was nothing short of catastrophic. The men, caught off guard, stumbled back as the force of the blow sent one of them crashing into the wall, knocking him unconscious in an instant. The other men hesitated, their confidence faltering in the face of the animal's raw strength. But they quickly recovered, raising their weapons. The millionaire felt a cold chill run down his spine. The danger wasn't over. In fact, it had only just begun. The masked men were regrouping, preparing to strike back. They were ruthless, and they had the advantage. He could see the fear in their eyes, but that fear quickly turned to anger as they adjusted their focus to the horse, now the only obstacle standing between them and their target. The tension in the room reached a boiling point. The millionaire's mind was racing, but there was no time for hesitation. The horse stood strong, unyielding, ready to protect him at all costs. But would it be enough? Would the animal's sheer willpower be enough to turn the tide, or would they all fall to the ruthless invaders? The final moments before the storm broke felt like an eternity. Every sound was amplified, the creaking of the floorboards, the heavy breathing of the men, the frantic beating of his own heart. The stakes had never been higher. The millionaire's future, his very life, now hung in the balance, and all he could do was watch as the horse prepared to make its final stand. Then, just as the men lunged forward, the world seemed to slow. The horse, with a movement too swift to follow, bolted forward again, a blur of motion, its hooves striking the ground with a deafening crash. It was now or never. Would it be enough to turn the tide, or would they all be consumed by the chaos? As the horse lunged forward, its hooves striking the ground with a force that seemed to shake the very air, the millionaire could feel the tension reach its breaking point. He held his breath, watching the masked men retreat a step, eyes wide with disbelief. It was as if they hadn't expected the animal to be more than just a nuisance. But in the next instant, the atmosphere shifted once again, and it was clear the battle had only just begun. Out of nowhere, a loud crash reverberated through the estate. The walls shuddered, and the windows rattled. The sound came from the back of the mansion, an explosion so powerful it knocked the millionaire off balance. His heart stopped. His mind raced. The attackers hadn't just come with weapons. They brought more than he could have ever prepared for. Before he could react, smoke began to pour into the room. The air turned thick, suffocating. His vision blurred, and the world around him seemed to warp, distorted by the chaos. The horse, still rearing and kicking, continued to protect him, but even it seemed stunned by the sudden shift. The sound of shuffling feet echoed through the smoke, and the millionaire realized, with a sinking feeling, that the attackers weren't alone. From the haze emerged two more figures, silent, masked, and poised. They were dressed differently, their movements deliberate and calculating. These weren't just ordinary criminals. They were professionals, mercenaries, and the millionaire could feel the gravity of the situation pulling him deeper into a nightmare. In a swift motion, one of the new figures reached for a device strapped to their chest. A blinding light shot out, casting shadows in every direction. It was a stun grenade, a weapon designed to incapacitate without causing permanent harm. The millionaire barely had time to react before the blinding light hit him square in the chest. His vision flickered, his body went numb, and for a split second he felt weightless. The horse, sensing the shift in energy, tried to break free, but its movements were sluggish now. The stun grenade had done its work, and the room seemed to spin as everything around the millionaire fell into disarray. The attackers had anticipated this. They were prepared for anything, even the unexpected threat of a horse charging into the fray. But then, just as he began to lose consciousness, something astonishing happened. The horse, seemingly unscathed by the stun grenade's effect, regained its strength. With a loud whinny, it lunged forward again, this time with more urgency. The attackers, caught off guard, scrambled to react, but the horse was unstoppable. It knocked one of the mercenaries to the ground, its powerful legs sending him flying into the wall with a sickening thud. The millionaire's heart sank. Who was she? What did she want with him? And why had she sent all these attackers to his door? And more importantly, why had the horse been brought into this? As the smoke cleared, the mercenaries regrouped, their focus now divided between the woman and the horse. The situation was growing more dire by the second. The woman's smile never faltered, but the tension in the air was palpable. Whatever game was being played, the stakes had just escalated to a level far beyond anything he had imagined. The millionaire found himself at the center of a storm, and as he tried to gather his thoughts, a single question lingered. Could he trust the horse? Or had he, in his arrogance, made yet another fatal mistake? The pieces were falling into place, but the true purpose behind it all was still hidden, just out of reach. And as the woman's voice cut through the silence, the millionaire knew his life would never be the same again. The tension in the room reached its peak as the woman's cold smile deepened. She seemed to relish the chaos unfolding around her, her eyes narrowing as she studied the horse. The mercenaries had regained their footing, weapons drawn and ready, while the horse, still fierce and determined, stood poised to protect its new master. But just as the air seemed to thicken with the weight of impending doom, something unexpected happened. The woman's smile faltered. A subtle shift in her posture gave her away a flicker of uncertainty. For a brief moment, it was as if the world around her had stopped moving. Her gaze, once confident, now seemed uncertain, her eyes flicking from the horse to the millionaire and back again. The millionaire, still dazed, but slowly coming to his senses, couldn't understand what was happening. He watched in silence as the mercenaries hesitated. Something had thrown them off, something beyond their control. And in that instant, he realized what it was. The horse. The horse wasn't just an ordinary animal, not a simple creature meant to shield him from danger. It was more. It was connected to the woman, to the attackers, and possibly even to the very reason his life had turned upside down. The woman's gaze darkened, and in a flash, she stepped forward, her hand reaching for a hidden compartment at her side. The moment she did, the horse's eyes glowed with an unnatural intensity, its body tensing as it prepared to charge. The millionaire's heart raced. Was the horse reacting to the woman's movements? Was it trying to stop her from doing something dangerous? Or was it something even more sinister? Before he could process it, the woman drew a small device from her side, and the entire mansion seemed to vibrate. The ground beneath their feet trembled, and an eerie hum filled the air. The millionaire's mind raced as he realized what was happening. The device wasn't just for show. It was a signal, a call to something larger, something hidden. The horse's body shifted, its muscles rippling with power. And then it did something the millionaire hadn't expected. It took a step toward the woman, its eyes filled with an almost knowing intelligence. The mercenaries, now visibly confused, lowered their weapons, their focus shifting between the horse and their employer. The woman's composure was slipping, her hand shaking as she held the device. She was no longer in control. And then, in a shocking turn, the horse whinnied, a sound unlike anything the millionaire had ever heard. The walls shook again, and for the first time, he understood what was truly happening. The horse wasn't protecting him. It had been protecting her. It had been watching, waiting for the right moment. As the woman looked back at the horse, her expression twisted from confidence to sheer panic. She dropped the device to the ground, but it was too late. The horse, now fully transformed, leapt forward with a terrifying speed, knocking her to the ground. The mercenaries moved to intervene, but the animal was too swift, too powerful. In an instant, they were scattered, pushed aside by the sheer force of the horse's movements. The millionaire stood frozen, his mind struggling to keep up with the unfolding events. What was happening? Why had the horse turned on the woman? What was it that he hadn't understood before? And then, as the chaos calmed for a split second, the horse turned to face him. The glow in its eyes faded, and for the first time, the millionaire saw it for what it truly was, a creature that had been sent not just to protect, but to guide him. The woman, now pinned beneath the weight of the horse, gasped for breath. Her expression, once full of malice, was now one of desperation. She had underestimated everything except the horse. She had expected to control the situation, to take everything from him, but the horse had turned the tables. With a final, guttural cry, the woman raised her hand, and the device in her palm began to hum once again. But before she could activate it, the horse lunged forward, crushing the device beneath its hooves. The mansion's shaking stopped, the oppressive air lifting as if a heavy weight had been removed. The millionaire's heart still pounded, but it was clear now the danger was over. He slowly approached the horse, his mind still reeling from the sudden shift in the story. The creature stood still, its gaze softening as it locked eyes with him. The millionaire felt something stir inside him, something he hadn't expected. Gratitude, understanding, but most of all, a realization that his life had been in the hands of something far more powerful than anything he had ever known. As the last of the mercenaries were taken away, the millionaire stood at the center of the room, trying to piece together what had just happened. The truth was clear. Now, this was no random attack. This was a carefully orchestrated plot, one that had been set in motion long before he'd ever met the horse. And as the dust began to settle, the horse remained at his side, waiting. The final twist in the tale wasn't just the attack. It was the revelation that the horse had been sent to guide him to something far greater. The millionaire had unknowingly stepped into a world of secrets, of power, of forces far beyond his comprehension. And now, with the horse at his side, he had a choice to make: walk away from everything he knew or embrace a new destiny, one where his wealth and arrogance meant nothing, and the power of the horse could change the course of everything. With a single step, he knew his life would never be the same again. The mansion was eerily quiet now, the dust settling like a thick veil over the room. The remnants of the chaotic scene, the broken walls, the scattered furniture, and the crumpled bodies of the mercenaries seemed surreal in the aftermath of the madness. The millionaire stood there, his heart still pounding in his chest, trying to make sense of everything that had just happened. The horse, standing proudly at his side, was more than just a protector. It was something greater, something powerful, and perhaps even something ancient. Its eyes, once filled with an unsettling glow, had softened, and now it looked at him as though it knew the path he was about to walk. The millionaire took a deep breath, his mind struggling to process the truth that had just been thrust upon him. His life, everything he had known, had changed in the span of a few short hours. As he moved toward the wreckage of the device the woman had dropped, he realized it was no ordinary tool. It was a transmitter, one that had been sending out a signal. The million-dollar mansion he had once considered his sanctuary had been nothing more than a trap, a carefully constructed setting for a much larger scheme. His wealth, his influence, his entire existence had been manipulated by forces far beyond his control. The woman, her true identity still a mystery, had been orchestrating everything from the shadows. The horse, the device, the attack, it had all been a part of her plan to push him into this very moment. But why? What did she want? Why had she chosen him? The questions swirled in his mind, each one more urgent than the last. He needed answers, and he needed them now. The woman, still lying on the floor beneath the weight of the horse, seemed to be regaining her senses. Her eyes fluttered open, and she let out a groan, trying to push herself up. The millionaire stepped forward, his voice steady but filled with the edge of authority that had become second nature to him in the business world. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice cold and commanding. The woman, her face bruised and battered, looked up at him with a mixture of defiance and desperation. She seemed to weigh her options before finally speaking, her voice low and strained. "You still don't understand, do you?" she said, her words dripping with contempt. "It was never about you. It was about the horse." The millionaire frowned, confusion mixing with a growing sense of dread. "The horse? What do you mean?" She laughed bitterly, wincing as she shifted her position. "The horse is the key to everything. You think it's just an animal, don't you? But you're wrong. It's part of something much bigger, something ancient. And now it's bound to you." The words hung in the air, thick with meaning, but the millionaire couldn't make sense of them. He had no idea what she was talking about, and the thought of being bound to something so powerful, so mysterious, terrified him. The woman's eyes darkened as she continued, "You were chosen, not because of your wealth, not because of your status. You were chosen because you were the one who could unlock the power within the horse. And now, that power is yours to wield. But make no mistake, you're not the only one who wants it. There are others, far more dangerous than me, who will stop at nothing to claim it." A chill ran down the millionaire's spine as her words sank in. He had been chosen? To do what? Unlock the power of the horse? The pieces were starting to come together, but he still couldn't understand the full picture. The horse wasn't just an animal. It was a key, a catalyst for something greater. Something he had never been prepared for. The woman's gaze softened for the briefest moment, her anger giving way to something else, regret, perhaps, or resignation. "You'll never be able to run from this. It's too late now. The moment you allowed the horse into your life, you sealed your fate." The millionaire's thoughts were a whirlwind. He had been manipulated, played like a pawn in a game he hadn't even known existed. But he couldn't let fear control him. Not now. Not after everything he had just been through. He had to take control of his destiny, whatever it might be. "I'll figure this out," he said, his voice firm. "And when I do, I'll make sure no one uses me or the horse for their own gain." The woman didn't respond. Instead, she simply let out a soft laugh, her eyes distant, as if she knew something he didn't. The millionaire turned to face the horse, which stood beside him, calm and composed as ever. Its eyes met his, and for the first time, he felt a sense of understanding between them, a bond forged not by choice, but by fate. The horse had been there when he needed it most, and now it was clear that it would be by his side through whatever came next. But as he reached out to touch the horse's mane, a distant sound broke through the stillness, the sound of approaching sirens. The authorities were on their way. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. The millionaire's heart raced again, but this time he felt a strange calm. Whatever had just happened, whatever truths had been revealed, he would not face it alone. The horse had proven its strength, and in return, he would do everything in his power to protect it. He had no idea what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, he felt ready to face whatever came his way. The woman, still on the ground, looked up at him one last time, her face a mask of defiance. "You don't know what you're getting yourself into, but you will. And when you do, you'll wish you'd never crossed me." But the millionaire wasn't listening anymore. He didn't need to. He had made up his mind. Whatever lay ahead, he would stand tall. And with the horse at his side, he knew he would face the challenges ahead with strength and resolve. As the sirens grew louder, the millionaire and the horse stood together, facing an uncertain future. But one thing was clear: this was only the beginning. The journey ahead would be long and dangerous, but the millionaire had learned something invaluable today. He wasn't just a man of wealth. He was a man of purpose, and with the horse as his ally, he was ready to unlock the power that had been waiting for him all along. And so, with the sound of approaching footsteps and the weight of his new destiny settling on his shoulders, the millionaire took his first step into the unknown. The world had just changed, and so had he. The game had just begun.